Right, the LMP1 category that began from the ashes of Group C in the early 90s and forged legends at Le Mans and in sports car racing in general, such as the dominant Audis of the late 90s and 2000s, the Audi v Peugeot rivalry, the Audi v Porsche rivalry, along with countless other stories across the world. Actually, I realized that most of these are entirely related to Audi, has reached its end. While it went so strong for so many years, it all started to go a bit wrong in the last few years of the category. Over the years, more and more manufacturers pulled out of the class, which is a problem, particularly in a class designed for manufacturers. Sure, LMP1 has had its fair share of privateers, Rebellion, SMP, and Bicolors being the most recent of the lot, but realistically, they could never have stacked up to the big guns. A few years back, Porsche and Audi decided that they were done with P1 and left for Formula E, leaving Toyota as the one remaining manufacturer in the category. What followed was, until the WEC started getting genetic copies of Clive Palmer probably to sit in the front seat of the Toyotas, was total Toyota domination, which was about as exciting as you'd expect. As good as the LMP1 formula had been, it was no longer sustainable. The WEC had to get rid of it. So for the 2021 season, the WEC will be introducing the replacement for LMP1, Hypercar. So now to answer the question that you've probably come here for. What is the WEC Hypercar, and what will sports car racing look like in the next year and beyond? Well, the Hypercar regs have frequently been described as a return to the GT1 days of the late 1990s. A manufacturer either has the option to run a homologated road car, being a road car that has been upgraded for hypercar competition, or a prototype-based race car that has the appearance of a road-based hypercar or is of an original design. Hypercars have the option of running a hybrid or a non-hybrid setup. The field will also be kept equal through a balance of performance system similar to what is used in modern GT racing. Because of the BOP system, it means that there is no incentive for teams to be spending astronomical amounts of money per year, as the cars will be slowed down anyway. That means that teams could be spending as little as 20 million euros a year. That is of course significantly less than the approximately 200 million euros that the big guns of P1 were spending a few years ago. Some pace will be sacrificed. The hypercars will be expected to be 10 seconds slower than the old LMP1 cars around Le Mans. A few manufacturers are already gearing up to enter the formula for the start of the next season and beyond, and a close friend of mine in the racing community is going to tell you all about them. SRA Smoking Puppy 841, take it away.
They may no longer be allowed to run the all-conquering TS050 hybrid, but Toyota is still sticking around for the hypercar era with a purpose-built prototype, expected to be called the GR Supersport. Details of the car have been kept relatively secret ahead of an official launch in January. With 200 horsepower coming from the hybrid system, the ICE will actually be the least powerful on the entire WEC grid. The car has already been tested at Paul Ricard, and the Japanese giant seems ready to go for a fourth consecutive Le Mans win in 2021. Ambitious US manufacturer Scuderia Cameron Glickenhaus were the first to commit to the hypercar regulations, and the frequent Nürburgring 24 Hours competitor is also the only one to be offering up customer cars. The SCG 007 was originally going to be powered by an Alfa Romeo engine, but rule changes mean that instead it will be a twin-turbo V8 made by Pippo Motors. Long-time entrant Colin Colas and the Bicolors racing team effort are also returning, with the PMC Project LMH. The PMC, which is also going to have a road and track day editions, is going to race with a detuned version of the Gibson 4.5 litre V8 which has been in their LMP1 car since 2019. The top class has been in need of a new manufacturer since 2017, and one will come in the form of Peugeot. Three-time Le Mans winners are returning to endurance racing for the first time since 2011, and their hybrid power hypercar, built in partnership with Ligier Automotive, looks set to be making its debut in 2022. But what about Aston Martin, you might ask? The British marque's commitment to the category was the only reason hypercar happened in the first place, but the effort quickly went from a quartet of V12 Valkyries to zero in just a few months. Although officially only postponed, this program is very much dead. So there we have it. 4 hypercars with 4 very different stories, and hopefully more on the way.
Thank you very much, Smoking Puppy. So this all sounds pretty good, But I think it's time to look at some of the positives and some of the negatives of the new formula. The first and most obvious upside seems to be a renewed manufacturer interest in top-level endurance racing, and it looks like the new hypercar regs are not only skewed towards the giants of the automotive industry, it appears it might also create a level playing field for the little guy as well. Another benefit, in theory, should be the reduction in cost, which is always a good thing. It means that big manufacturers can't simply throw money at the problem, and if it does well in its first couple of years, more manufacturers will be enticed to join up, looking at you, Mercedes, Bugatti, and anyone else who has a road-going hypercar on the way. There are some downsides though. Many have argued that hypercar will sort of make GTE kind of redundant, as we'll have two road-based, if you can even call it that, categories, racing in the same series. Yes, that may be true, but GTE is, how do I put this? Probably bound for a better place. The other issue that I can see with this is a problem that WEC has kind of created of their own design, and it's called LMDH. Allow me to explain. In 2021, the top class of prototype racing in the WEC will consist of the hypercars as well as the grandfathered LMP1 cars. The old P1 cars will be eligible until the end of 2021 and will have their performance adjusted to match the hypercars. The only team that will be doing this as of right now will be Signatech Alpine, running an old Rebellion R13. However, in 2022, the LMP1 cars will be ditched entirely, and the IMSA WeatherTech Sports Car Championship will be introducing the replacement for DPI, known as LMDH, into their championship, which will also be eligible for the WEC, as hypercars will also be eligible for IMSA. For those of you that don't know, DPI cars are based on an LMP2 chassis, but have styling cues of the manufacturer running the car. LMDH will more or less be the same idea, only with a hybrid system. As of 2022, both hypercars and LMDH cars will be eligible for a universal prototype class, which will be more or less universal across IMSA and the WEC. Now, this would all be well and good if, of course, LMDH simply replaced LMP1 and DPI across the board, but that is not the case, obviously, with the two categories competing together. The problem with that is LMDH cars will most likely be cheaper to build and cheaper to run than the hypercars, and by quite some margin, perhaps even tens of millions of euros. Even if the hypercars are based on road cars to some degree, and the manufacturers can rejoice in their road relevancy even for a little while, surely race teams and manufacturers will soon realize that they may as well just run the LMDH cars, as they'll be cheaper and on a level playing field. Not to mention the fact that Glickenhaus will be offering their cars to customers only, and those programs will most likely cost far less than the fully fledged factory programs, and surely the big race teams will be sick of paying for the hypercars given the other options, even if they are a lot cheaper than the old P1 cars. This could turn out to be quite a significant problem, which could see the hypercar formula phased out entirely in favor of LMDH. However, if the hypercar category survives and somehow manages to coexist with the LMDH cars and the manufacturers and teams don't get sick of paying for them, then it could be a very, very cool category, and it could mean a return to the GT1 days of old that many fans are nostalgic about. Before we wrap up today, I'd like to thank SRA Smoking Puppy 841 for joining us today, and I'll give him a chance